one of the big issues that they have going on right now is the future of Santee Cooper. And when it comes to Santee Cooper, they've had, well, you know what? It's been a mess. They have that mountain of debt. They are basically on this. The state has to work out what's happening with the power company. And as you can imagine, the state has a lot of other important business at hand. So they've hired some consultants to help them figure out the future of Santee Cooper. And I believe that we have with us,
you are
Dr.
correct.
Smith on the phone, Dr. Oran Smith, who is with the Palmetto Promise Institute, who has been doing all of the research to try to help, because lawmakers are not experts on what to do about Santee Cooper. Thankfully, they've hired some folks who can do the in-depth research and recommend what they think would be in the best interest of all of the people of South Carolina in regards to how to handle the future of Santee Cooper. And Dr. Smith, are you there on the line?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I looked over the report, and I don't want to give away, I have not told our listeners what you came to the conclusion of, but I was hoping maybe that you could tell us. I didn't want to spoil the surprise.
Yes, well, we entitled the report After the Iceberg.
Oh, my goodness.
What is the best lifeboat for Santee Cooper customers and South Carolina taxpayers? The iceberg being the VC Summer nuclear project that was entered into by SCANA and by Santee Cooper, and the demise of that project when they were unable to complete it and they pulled the plug on it. That created a lot of debt for both SCANA and Santee Cooper. And the SCANA issue has been resolved by the buyout from Dominion and by a couple of court cases that rebated some of the lost ratepayer payments that were made to cover the VC Summer. But Santee Cooper then was next in line for the legislature to deal with. Mm-hmm. So they have set up a process where as early as this week, the Department of Administration, which is one of the members of the cabinet, that they will actually make a report three options for Santee Cooper. One, Santee Cooper could sort of try to fix themselves. Another would be they would hire a management company to come in and run the company. And the third would be it would be sold to a private entity. And when we looked at this report, and I almost need to apologize for the length of it, but once we got into it, we realized we needed to be comprehensive, but we didn't realize we were going to hit 60 pages and 160 footnotes.
That's still not as thick as most of what the legislature puts out themselves. So,
right, that's true. But we looked at things like, what is the legal situation? There are a lot of court cases, both federal and state cases, that are in play, and there's some exposure there for Santee Cooper. We looked at the generation, actually how they generate power and how dependent they are upon coal. And then we also looked at the balance sheet, and we looked at Santee Cooper as if they were an investor-owned utility. What would their balance sheet look like? And all of those just showed a very vulnerable state agency. And our idea, both from a free market perspective and from just the nature of the situation, is that we feel that a purchase, as long as the purchaser is able to work out a relationship with the cooperatives, because the electric cooperatives of South Carolina, who serve every county in the state, purchase about 60% of Santee Cooper's power. So if there's a way for a new company to come in, buy out Santee Cooper, pay off the debt, and make an arrangement with the cooperatives, we just think that would be the best option.
Mm-hmm. And you actually did a spreadsheet here that I'm looking at that shows that if we don't do what you're recommending, am I looking at this correct? That's going to cost us almost $14 million in rates for our power bill. Oh, that's just $14 billion. $14
billion. And the way we get to that number is it's in the high six, nearly $7 billion of principal. It's kind of like a car loan. If you think of it in terms of a car loan, you have your principal and you have your interest, and the interest is almost as much as the principal. So you're looking at nearly $14 billion, both of debt related to the VC Summer project and then other debt. For instance, there was a PD coal project, coal-powered plant that was going to be built. That was not built, so the ratepayers are still paying for that as well. So, over time, you're talking about paying that off is going to take until 2056.
Oh, my goodness.
At this point, you're passing along the costs of all those failed projects. You're passing it along to your children and your grandchildren, which doesn't seem right, particularly if there's an option for a company that maybe might be so large that they were able to just write off that debt out of the calculations they use to set their rates, and then the ratepayer doesn't have to pay it.
Okay, so explain to us how that will work. At this point, do you believe that when you're presenting this information to the legislature, then they've all said, as they've spoken with us, that they want to do what's in the best interest of South Carolinians and the folks that are going to be paying for power? Do you feel like a company is going to come in that's going to clear the debt in its entirety and they're not going to pass on any of that to us once they start providing us with our power bills?
Well, there was a process that was started earlier where the legislature sought potential buyers, and it was basically a chance for companies to see if they had interest. And they submitted proposals, and they were not binding proposals in the sense that the ones that they're starting to receive now are binding, but it was just expressions of interest. And there were companies that said, yes, we will. And utility finance is very strange. It's basically utilities charge for the assets that they have in paying them back. So you don't have true competition for power. So these companies who are in the electricity business, they say, well, we built this asset, for instance, the VC Summer 2 and 3 reactors that are just holes in the ground. We built that, so therefore we have to bill for that. And that's how they calculate rates based on those assets. So if assets are written off the books, then it's not a part of what is known as rate base, and it doesn't hit the customer in the rates. So, yes, there are private companies that, and, they may have grand plans for Santee Cooper that fit into their goals for their company that we might not necessarily be aware of, whereas writing off that debt might be in their best long-term interest for other goals they may have for their company. So it seems kind of amazing that but if you have a company that has enough capital and enough investors, see, Santee Cooper has no investors because it's a state agency.
Right.
But Dominion, Duke, Next Era out of Florida, those are all investor-owned utilities who have investors. So they have capital they can access to build more efficient plants and pay off debt and those types of things.
So down the road, if they were to sell, would you assume, and I'm going to be honest, I haven't read all of this report, it's really long, but is the assumption that even if the rates do increase, as most utility rates increase on all of us every year anyway, it wouldn't be as bad as what will happen if we don't sell Santee Cooper? Right.
That is the basic point. You've got it. There may be increases at some point, but just the very nature of the beast is as long as that nearly $14 billion worth of debt is sitting out there, it's that the piper is going to have to be paid. And there are certain years very close in front of us, basically 5 years from now is one of the points where the debt is really, really high that's coming due that year. So, I mean, we're at the precipice. And we're amazed that the legislature has taken up this issue so aggressively because unlike other issues with the state government, it's not the governor's decision. It's the legislature's decision. And when you've got 170 people that have to make a decision, that is a little complicated. So they set this process up where they would have three options: the one purchase, the one manage, and the one sort of self-help. And we're really kind of amazed that the legislature, once they dealt with SCANA and Cooper, that they moved so quickly to try to set up this process. So it seems like a fair process and one that is going to yield a result that's the best thing for the ratepayer and the taxpayer, we're hoping. So
self-help versus selling it, that I understand those two concepts. How would having a third-party management company swoop in, how would that ever be a solution at all? Or you just totally aren't even considering that option?
Well, that's an option that we looked at, and what we did on that option is we looked around for an entity and a situation in America that was similar, and we looked at a company known as the Long Island Power Authority in New York, known as LIPA. And LIPA, it was kind of a LIPA suction that went on because
that's a good one.
There was a company to run LIPA, and that company was paid quite handsomely, but they frankly did not do a very good job because they did not have a lot of skin in the game. They were just hired help. They were rented managers. So the outcome there was not good, and the state government had to eventually step in, Governor Cuomo and others. So the example that we found that was very similar, and that was a state-owned entity that had a lot of debt, that a management company came in. It just didn't end well. In fact, it's still ongoing. So we felt that was just not really a serious possibility, because you're just literally trying to save a few million when you've got a debt of many billions.
Gotcha. So when you recommend that only a sale is going to allow for us to get out of this with the least impact to the ratepayer, is there a dollar amount? Is there a bottom line number that we have to get for us to break even, for it to make sense?
Well, I think just the main issue is the idea, as we said, of writing those dollars off of the rate base, so that it's not hitting the customer anymore. And we're very careful in this part of the issue, and that is we say what is the best option for taxpayers. Santee Cooper is state owned, but the full faith and credit of the state is not necessarily a backer of their bonds that they sell to finance their operations. But if for some reason this court case were to go against Santee Cooper, or these couple of court cases, and they were forced to rebate all of the funds that customers had paid for VC Summer 2 and 3, that could hurt their bottom line to have to declare some form of bankruptcy, and the state would not want one of their agencies to be technically insolvent. So the state, I don't know that they would step in, but there would be calls for the state to step in, and then the state would have some vulnerability. The taxpayers would have vulnerability then. We don't think that would ever actually happen, but if the court case goes south on Santee Cooper, that could happen. So we're thinking about the ratepayers and of the taxpayers.
Okay. You mentioned that after you send this report to the legislature, that we've got to get a lot of people on the same page, or at least a majority, so that they vote to go forward with the sale. Do you see them being able to tackle this issue and make a final decision in this legislative session?
I think they are ready to be done with it, frankly. It has taken up a lot of time. There have been, at least by my count, I think 5 study committees impaneled, and just hours and hours and hours of testimony from both the cooperatives and Santee Cooper and others. So I think they're really ready to do it and get it done. And they need to get it done relatively early. But thankfully, a lot of it hinges on the Department of Administration's report that we think may be out as soon as Wednesday of this coming week.
Okay.
They have the possibility of a 60-day extension if they think they need it, and then we're talking about more like March 15th. But I think if the Department of Administration's report is of the nature that the legislature has confidence in it, that it was put together fairly, and it provides the 3 options in a clear and concise easily understandable way, I think the legislature could make pretty quick work of it. But if for some reason there's some doubt that is cast on that report, or it's not what they were looking for, that might bog things down a bit. So it's all kind of in the hands of the Department of Administration at this point.
I understand. Dr. Smith, before I let you go, I want to ask you one last question. Let's say that they run with your report and the vote is final. They decide to sell Santee Cooper. How long do you think, if we looked at it as if we were purchasing a home and we're going to close on it, how long do you think it will be before we hit that closing date?
Oh, wow. That is related to this issue. That is one that I have, frankly, not considered. That is a very good question. I think because of all the relationship with the cooperatives, the electric cooperatives, mm-hmm. And other relationships, that would have to be a legal team that would represent a lot of entities that have a piece of this issue. So it could be months.
Okay.
I think, before it were consummated, so to speak. But some of those issues are probably being worked out in the proposals that the various entities are submitting who have an interest in Santee Cooper. So if all of that were front loaded, it could go quickly. But if the court case that's in play were to cause some complications, it might take a little longer.
All right. Dr. Oran Smith, you are the senior fellow with the Palmetto Promise Institute, working with our legislature to figure out what we're going to do with our Santee Cooper mess. And thank you so much for sharing the information from your report with our listeners. I feel like we got the scoop on something that's going to be a big story for the next few months. We really appreciate your time.
Very good. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, Dr. Smith.
You too.